And I'm so excited just to introduce you to Beth because she is a wonderful friend and a fantastic writer. And so, if you haven't read her books yet, I've got the Thatcher Sisters right here. That's her latest series. And I'm sure we will talk about these. But, Beth, do you want to take a moment just to introduce yourself to everyone who's here?
I am Beth, and I'm Cara's friend. And that's the most fun thing. I just love Cara, and yes, I'm an author. I started out writing nonfiction. If you've heard my story, I said I would never write fiction, and then I had a season of burnout. And God changed that season of burnout, and He brought me over to the dark side. And I started writing fiction, fell in love with it. I love telling stories. I started out writing contemporary romance, and then I've been writing women's fiction. And right now I'm working on a Christmas novella, and then I have some other story ideas that I'm mulling over and have been talking about with my agent. So
That is so fun. And that's always kind of one of those scary processes of being a writer when we're in that kind of in between where one series is wrapped up and now you're kind of trying to imagine what's next. So, what's kind of, if in your ideal world, what do you want to do next? Because, like, the Thatcher Sisters was kind of a family saga, there's romance, but there's like these deep issues as well and how they impact families and things like that. You have done the fun kind of destination contemporary romance types of novels. What do you think is next for you?
whatever I write, I love to delve into complicated relationships,
Yeah.
sister relationships, even romantic relationships. I mean, the road to happily ever after is never easy. And so I
Yep.
love to delve into just how relationships can be complicated and how do we begin to understand one another better. I always say that, God loves us and He steps into the middle of our complicated, difficult lives and He says, I have more for you than this. And so I love to weave in the faith angle too.
Yeah. Well, and you do it beautifully. And Rachel McDaniel saying hi. But one of the things that oh, and she's like, the road to happily ever after is never easy. Love that. And I was thinking the same thing. That's such a true statement because often in novels or in movies, they make it look like it's you start here and then it's just going to be this straight journey and then you end up with happily ever after. But real life means it's work. And so I love that you portray that in your novels. I mean, I really enjoyed the Thatcher Sisters, but I think this one was my favorite. And it's because it addresses those hard, real issues. And okay, the heroine's not very likable in the first book. And then she grows on you in the second. And then by the third, I was like, oh, I just want to give her a hug and say it's going to be okay. And so, that takes a lot of talent to take someone who starts as this really unlikable older sister who's like, I'm going to tell you exactly how to live your life.
Mhm.
But her happily ever after is not a straight shot.
No, and it was also so challenging because in the Thatcher Sisters series, I told one sister's story in each book. And I knew, Johanna's story didn't come till book 3. And not a lot of people liked Johanna's
Yeah.
in book 1. And the challenge was how to make people go with me till book 3 so that
Yeah.
they would like her enough to stay with me and hear her story. I had one friend, she's an author, Dee Topliff, and she said to me after reading book 1, I don't like her, but there's reasons why
Yeah.
she is the way she is. And I was like, you're right. Now I've got to get people to stay with me and find out
What?
why she's
Yeah.
so rough around the edges and so controlling. We all know people like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the things that I didn't like about her in book 1 because it felt really like, okay, I can as an oldest, I can tend to be, hey, I know what the right thing to do is. If you just did what I told you to, everything would just be fine. Um, and then, but as you see this evolution, I mean, and you've walked through life with me in some pretty deep ways, and know the kind of the journey of, okay, how do we shift? How do we grow? And it's really easy to say, this is it. This is who I am. This is what you signed up for, without allowing for the growth and the development that God wants in a relationship. And what I really liked, I think, about her development was you start seeing that. You start seeing how God's like, you're in relationship to force change. And yet it's done with some kindness. And yeah, so is that kind of what you were thinking? Or is that just something that I'm kind of imputing into her story?
You know, when we're in relationships with other people, we're either drawn toward them or we're pushed away from them. And we either want to get to know them better and try to understand them, or we can walk away from them. And I think that's the challenge. And even when we're reading a book, sometimes readers have to be willing to allow the character arc, give the character time to change, because they come on the page a certain way and there's reasons for that. And part of the book is the character arc. Will they change? Will they not? That's true in real life. Will we change or will we not, based on the circumstances that we're faced with? And yes, we've gone through some difficult times together. But I have to share this. One of my first memories of you, I don't know if you remember this. We were at a writers' conference and I had gone to Rachel Houck's praise and worship time,
Yeah.
that she did. And it was a beautiful time. And there was another writer there that we both know. And I didn't know you really well at the time, but this other writer just needed some prayer. And I walked over to her and I wrapped my arms around her and I'm praying for her. I had my eyes closed. I'm praying for her. And the next thing I know, I felt this other body come in and this person wrapped their arms around her too. And I'm like, okay, now we got a threesome. What's going on? And I just kind of opened my eyes, to see. And it was you that had come in to join in prayer for this other person. That was one of my first impressions of you, Cara, was
Oh,
that
wow.
you were a prayer warrior.
Yeah.
Someone in need. And so when we were going, when you were sharing about some of your difficult times and I'm walking alongside with you, one of the things I knew about you was that you were open to how God was going to lead. And so you were going to be willing to change during this difficult time, because that was my first memory of you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Stepping into somebody who was having a difficult time and praying over them. First memory.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so funny because I don't think I would have identified that as like one of our first interactions. But then we also did the Grove Girls together for a
Yes.
number of years. And that was such a fun kind of collaboration with you and Christy Cameron and Catherine Ray and Sarah
Yes.
Ladd. And just there were like 8 of us that it was so fun because we were focused on how do we encourage readers on the faith side.
Yes.
And it was just this different aspect because our books all have faith overlays, but we were like, no, the purpose of this is to come alongside people on the faith encouragement side. And that was so much fun. And it was just such a neat community that I'll always be grateful for, because there's just this richness and this life on life aspect that, I think going through the pandemic, we've all had to choose, which relationships are we going to keep close, and it's really emphasized the importance of community. And I've always just been grateful for groups like the Grove Girls and you and other people where God places us in community for a reason. We're not supposed to go through life on our own, and when
Right.
we do, we end up being like Johanna in book 1. We're
Yeah.
like, I've got it all together and I'm in control and I can't trust anybody else with anything.
Right. And so often people will say the writing life is solitary. And yes, we
Yeah.
have our time when it's us and our imaginary characters and we're writing. And yet I have found that the relationships that I've made with other writers, like the Grove Girls, with you when, I've been sitting in my car and we've been talking on the
Yeah.
phone, or, we text in the morning. Those relationships have enriched my life, and they've helped me
Absolutely.
during the times when I'm struggling or discouraged. I can, you know that my youngest daughter is going to have ankle surgery
Yeah.
later this month, and you're praying for her. And having that connection encourages me and strengthens me as a writer. And so,
Mhm.
yes, I have to be by myself and write my story, but I also have a personal life and I need my connection with my friends and my friends who are writers who encourage me as a writer and help me through those times when I'm not sure what's happening next or I'm not sure
Yeah.
what's happening with this story. We need that.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the fun things. Like, I've got a proposal out right now, and you and I brainstormed on it at one point. And it's one of the things that I love about the writing community, at least the ones that we're in, ACFW, My Book Therapy, all these different types of groups, is it's so supportive. It's all about, okay, instead of being like, no, I can't share my idea with you because what if you steal it? It's like, no, I'm going to help you make your story better. And you need that bouncing. If we get trapped in our heads, we lose sight of some of the avenues we could go in, or how we can make things richer, or how we can make that happily ever after a journey instead of a foregone conclusion,
Right.
and keep readers guessing. And so, and that's the richness. And there have been so many times I've been grateful for that, because sometimes you can't go to the people who are right next to you because of whatever journey you're on. You need someone who's outside that context, someone who has an outside perspective. And so writing has really been a gift to me in that aspect of getting to know, spiritually deep people like you and Pepper Basham and folks like that, Rachel Hauk, that I could be like, okay, I just need prayer or I need brainstorming. And having both of those is so important.
Earlier today, I was on the phone. I texted Rachel and I said, do you have a few minutes? And the next thing you know, she was FaceTiming me. And I'm working on this Christmas novella. And I realized, I said to her, I think my pacing's off. And so I was able to talk the story out with her and brainstorm, because I knew the pacing was off. But then
Yeah.
the question was, okay, what do I do with it? And so my brain's perking a little bit, but then she started brainstorming back with me, and brainstorming with another writer or with a trio of writers.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it just blows the walls out. And all of a sudden you're thinking everything's perking. And within 40 minutes, I was like, okay, now I know what to do. I
Yeah.
it's all, and what I say to her is, okay, now I need to mull because I've got all these different ideas and now I just need to corral the little chickies. And knowing that I could do that, if she was busy, she would have said, I'll talk to you in an hour or whatever. But knowing that you have writers like that who get you, because we writers get one another. Um, Sometimes I'll say, if you need me, shoot up a flare,
Yeah.
like, shoot up a prayer flare, or, just let me know what you need. If you don't have time, just that's what texts are wonderful things,
Yeah.
and just to be able to say, this is what I need right now, or this is what I need tomorrow. Can you be praying about that? And so to be able to talk about writing, to be able to let another writer know, hey, I'm sending out this proposal, send it, that writers community. And we have to actively seek it, and we have to actively pray about it. And it can be tiered where we find our mentors, we find our peers,
Yeah.
and we find those people that we're also mentoring. So we have those different tiers.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the things I love about ACFW, American Christian Fiction Writers, is there are ways then that you can okay, I'm going to teach workshops, or I'm going to look for, like for me, it's the first timers. I'm always kind of shepherding the first timers so that they know what to expect. And but it's so important to have those people who can push you to do more than you think you can do.
Yeah.
Those people who are at the same level, who can brainstorm and encourage and help. And then those that you're then pouring into, because every one of us is published because people have poured into us, and it changes by the season as to who that is. And you never arrive. That's the thing about writing. You absolutely never arrive. And so Rachel is like, yeah, the writing community is such a great network of support. And it's so, so true. And Linda talked about nothing in life is easy. So that's why it's good to escape into a good book. And as I'm looking at, my to be read pile here, there's just a few books that I'm like, I can't wait to dig into. But it's like, grades are finally done. I'm free for a few months. And so now I'm like, okay, what am I going to read? What's going to be that fun escape? So what's the latest book that you've read that you just really loved? And you're like, I think everyone should give this book a try. I mean, I know you read a lot, so, or you could even have like 3 or 4.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I actually read Rachel Hauck's To Save a King before it came out.
Yes, it was so good.
I love her Royal, House of Blues series. Rachel does royals like nobody else. And so I loved that series.
Yeah. She's actually going to be on next week, which will be fun, because I call them spiritual fairy tales. I mean, they're wonderful, although I still can't believe what she did to the prince, but it turned out okay. But wow, what a journey. I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
I'm reading, I read a book. Now I'm going way out in left field right now, but I read a book and it was called 5 Presidents. So we're talking nonfiction here. And it was about a Secret Service agent who
oh, cool.
started 5 presidents, starting with Eisenhower and going all the way through Ford. And I'm blanking, his first name is Clint, and I'm now blanking on his last name. But oh my gosh, it was fascinating to get this insider's look at
writing it down. That sounds like a great book.
Secret Service agent. I actually do Facebook Lives on Mondays, and I share a motivational quote. I put them up on my Instagram feed, but I also just get on Mondays and talk about this motivational quote. And then on Fridays, I do Facebook Lives, and I share First Line Fridays. And so I'm always talking about different books. And the most recent book I did was Rachel's. And so that was the most recent. I try to read the books before I put them up. I don't always do that. Right now I'm reading Delyn Weller's book, which is, why am I going to blank on it? It's like Love It, Sweetheart Farm or something like that. And I'm enjoying it. It's a light romantic read, but she actually does setting really well. And I think it's because she lives on a farm.
Oh, that would do it. Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm really getting a glimpse at her life. All right, I'm leaning over here. I want to read this one.
Oh, I've got it right here.
You have it?
Tapestry of Light.
Yes.
Yes.
And have you read this one?
Oh my gosh, Paris Dressmaker. When I read it, I was like, that's going to win all the awards next year, because it's phenomenal. So phenomenal.
Oh my gosh, people, this was wonderful. And she just told the title of her
The Italian Dancer?
The Italian Ballerina.
That's it. Italian Ballerina. Yeah, it's going to be.
Christy Cameron, people, so hot right now. Yeah. So hot. So, so that is one of my best reads for 2021.
And then I really liked Becky Wade's. That came out. Let It. Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about this Friday.
It was so good.
What a good first line. You'll hear it Friday on my Facebook page. What a good first line.
Well, what I loved is both the hero and heroine were a little different from your typical, because she's a math savant and he's this highly skilled heart surgeon, a pediatric heart surgeon. And yet I felt like I was so in their head. She did such a great job of characterizing, how that would be different than someone like me who's not a math savant, doesn't want to
I
be.
don't know if I can read the book. I don't do math at all.
Yeah, she ends up, she's teaching at like high school math or something, but she could have been, the next Albert Einstein type of person. And so it was just fun. And then Beverly was asking what kind of books you write, because she came in a little late. And so this is her latest series, the Thatcher Sister series. And you call it your Little Women series because it's all about digging
Little Women. It's Little Women gone wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Amy and Joe relationship. It's not Amy and Beth. It's not Amy and Meg, or Joe and Meg. It's
Right.
Joe and Amy.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you have the sisters who say, oh, my sister's my best friend. That's not what's happening in the Thatcher Sister series.
Yeah, it's just not happening here. Although they grow.
The relationships grow.
They understand each other.
And one of the interesting things about writing this book was in this series, when I started writing this series, none of the Thatcher sisters are believers. And it was so intriguing to write a family that's dealing with heartache, and yet they have no faith to lean on, and to really delve into that. How do you deal with heartache and difficulty? I mean, really deep, heart-wrenching difficulty when you can't lean into faith to help you, comfort you, to answer the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people like that in my life, and so that as a believer who does lean into her faith when life is hard, that was intriguing for me to delve into that.
Yeah, it's so true, because I think this last year, 18 months, you've seen some of that as well. How are people responding to the challenges of a pandemic? And you can see sometimes a difference between those who have faith and are like, well, I know who holds my future, versus those who don't. And there's so much fear. And, it is when you have to start thinking that way. Like, I've grown up in the faith. I was at a church on Sunday, and as I was explaining who I was and why I was up there talking, I was like, I don't remember not knowing and loving Jesus. I just don't. If you were going to ask me what's that day of salvation, I don't really have like that day, because it was just part of my family and part of how I grew up. And even with that, there are those moments where I call it the candy coating comes off your faith, and you have to decide, and you have to choose, and you have to lean into it. But if you don't have that, then everything's it shakes all the time, because you don't have that sure foundation. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then when you have situations like, the books where you're writing it, because then Delayed Justice, Jamie's not saved. And she's got that really hard story and can't imagine why God would even care about her, because he allowed these things to happen. And so when you're writing through that and you're trying to honor that story, because it's very real for a lot of people, it is intriguing. And to really think about, okay, God, how do you approach people who just aren't sure, or they've been so wounded, and their legitimate question is, why would you allow that? If you're a good God, why would you allow this to happen? Or I can't trust you to control things, so then I have to control things.
Yes.
And yeah, so it is. And it was fun to watch that arc, to watch that journey across the three sisters, because none of them has an easy story.
No. And it was really fun as an author, just to balance all of those stories, because in my stories, I don't like to tie everything up in a nice, neat bow. That's not real life. I don't know about you, but my life doesn't tie up in a nice, neat bow. I've stopped looking for the nice, neat bow. And so that's not how I write my stories. I try to write it very true to life. It's not that it's not that there isn't happiness. It's not that there isn't hope.
Yeah.
I definitely try to put hope. I've got a little hope sign back there.
Yeah.
I'm all about hope, but I'm also about real life. And so you'll see more of that in the Thatcher Sisters series. There's romance, yes, and there's laughter. I always have humor in my stories, but you're going to see more of hope and like we said, Little Women Gone Wrong, where there's difficulty and challenges in those sister relationships, but there's reasons why.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's what makes Christian fiction so wonderful, is that hope element.
Yeah.
You could take these stories, and someone who's not a Christian, the ending is going to be very different. And not that, I mean, my goodness, you did not tie this up all nice and neat with a bow. You did not. I was like, come on, give her some, joy. But at the same time, there was the hope that things were getting better, that she was growing, that the relationship was going to resolve in a positive way. But it wasn't this forced, okay, now it's all good because now she's, chasing God. So whoop, everything's just fixed.
Right.
And I loved that because it was so real and genuine, but there's still the hope that you can go through these hard circumstances. Life is tough. There are times when life is just hard and it's not fair and it's just not good, but God's still there and he can redeem anything. And that's the hope that overlays your stories. And then when you layer in a little humor, I'm willing to go places that normally I'd be like, yep, nope, this isn't going to be a happy ending. It's not going to be worth it at the end. So I'm done. And yet you're able to weave all of those different elements together.
Right. And what's the title of the third book? The title of the third book is The Best We've Been.
Yeah.
The Best We've Been. And that says a lot about everything that happens in that book, because the best we've been doesn't mean everything's perfect, but it can still be good.
Yeah.
It can still be good. And I think sometimes we each can come to that realization in our own lives, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of why God has us on earth, is to go, okay, so you got to grow, and here's the area we're going to work on next. And it's not perfect because we live in a fallen world, but he's still here. He's still redeeming it and, making us more in his son's image each day if we're willing.
Right.
And Beth has walked me through some of those where I'm like, am I willing? I don't know. I think so.
Well, and going back to how we were talking about community and the relationships and the friendships, the people who support us and help us deal with the difficult times and go, okay, it's not perfect, but I'm sticking with you through this difficult time. I'm praying you through this difficult time. I'm going to watch a funny movie with you right now.
Exactly.
And we're going to laugh, because for me, laughter is my favorite sound. But it's also, if I can have a good laugh with my friends, okay, then I'm gonna get up tomorrow and I'm gonna try again. And so community and friendships, for me, that's been a saving grace many, many times.
Yeah. Well, and at our church, we talk about there are these moments of encounter with God. So it's things like worship, communion, prayer. But one of those is also coming together as believers, that in those moments we can encounter God as well. And it's so true. So what are you most excited about as you think about, we've got the summer coming, you're in Colorado, which is always beautiful. Your daughter's coming home from college. So what has you really excited as you look at the next couple months?
What has me the most excited is that in Colorado, and I know this isn't true all over the country, we are able to get together as family again. We had our first big family get together in April. And so like this Sunday, we're going to be getting together as family again. And just when my house is full up with my family and everybody's laughing and the grandkids are ramming around and my kids are ramming around. And to me, that's good. Yeah. That's good. I don't, and when everybody leaves and I'm picking up and my husband's picking up and the house is a mess, I'm still happy. Um, that's just good times for
Yeah.
me to see my family, to hear the laughter. There are times I'll just stand in another room and I'll just listen to the conversations and the laughter. That's good for me.
That's
Re-
awesome.
Reasons to be thankful. And yes, I'll be writing and I'm thankful for that. I didn't do a lot of writing in 2020. There was just a lot of other stuff going on.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's what I'll be thankful for. It's just every time I hear conversation and laughter.
Yeah, and Linda says that's a blessing, the having the family around and the joy and the laughter. And that's so special because I think like my siblings were all pretty close. And now the second generation is really close. The cousins are best friends, even though there's distance. And it's just fun when everyone gets together. And yeah, so we're going to have one of those kind of family moments in June, which will be great.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us authors are like, 2020 was hard. It was hard. I know for me, it's hard to create when there's so much chaos. And 2020 was chaos. And then even into this semester, which is done, all my creativity had to go into teaching in a pandemic. And so I'm so excited to start writing again, hopefully on Thursday, just to be able to start playing and find the joy in writing again after, having to push through a pandemic to get a book out and things like that. So it's fun. It's nice to have this kind of anticipation of I'm ready to write again and don't know exactly. I've got a Christmas novella too. And then I'm trying to decide if I'm going to write one of my World War II ideas or one of my kind of legal suspense ideas. So we'll see. There's so much fun, so many ideas. So
That's good.
yeah. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. I hope you all enjoyed meeting Beth. She's just wonderful. And I think you've gotten a sense of kind of her personality and why she's such a dear friend for me. But I really encourage you to check out her books if you hadn't. The Thatcher Sisters is a really wonderful series. And like Linda was saying, it's hard to read a book that has characters with all kinds of problems that rush to that perfect ending. And these don't, they're real life, but they're good. And they are so, I don't like women's fiction where I feel weighed down, and it's not, because there's humor, there's hope, there's real life, there's a little bit of romance. And so these are great. And thank you, Linda, for voting for World War II. I really want to kind of dig into that time period again. And next week, Rachel Halk will be joining us, and then Lynn Austin. The week after that, we've got quite a great lineup. So thank you so much, Beth, and hope everyone has a great night.
Have a good night. This was great, Cara. Thanks for having me. I love you.
Yeah, love you too. All right, see you later.
Good night.